You're going to be in the parking lot?
No, like in the middle part.
In the middle part of what? Of the church?
I'm gonna pray first. I need to pray.
You need to pray?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Before you start praying, tell me exactly where you're at.
If you're driving towards the church, like I'm right out in front of the church.
The male voice you hear on a 911 call is Trevor Lee, a 14-year-old high school student from Middleburg, Florida. He had just killed both his parents before fleeing to a local church and called 911.
Did he make a mistake? Yes. He made a big mistake, a huge one. My little brother, he is not a monster.
He's not a bad person just because he made one bad decision. He's done so much for everyone I know, and I don't want him just to be known as a killer or a murderer.
6 years before Trevor would tragically take the lives of his own parents, his mother Brandy had shared a post on social media that now carries a haunting sense of foreboding. At the time, it seemed like a relatable moment from a mother venting her frustrations. Perhaps Brandy was simply expressing the challenges of motherhood, sharing a vulnerable and honest thought with her friends and family. But looking back now, that post now feels eerily prophetic. Fast forward to August 4th, 2025, that same little boy, now 14-year-old Trevor Lee, would call 911 and confess to the unimaginable. He had just taken the lives of both his parents inside their Middleburg, Florida home. What had once been a moment of motherly frustration had become a chilling reflection of the tragic events that would unfold years later. But before the video exposes the truth, let's revisit the beginning of this heartbreaking journey.
For it to get to that point to where you feel like that was the only option he had is the saddest thing that you could possibly think of.
14-year-old Trevor Lee's parents, 44-year-old David Lee and 45-year-old Brandy Smith, were well-known and well-liked figures in their community. The couple had built a reputation for being friendly, approachable, and deeply involved in local activities. They were known for their generosity, often volunteering at community events and lending a helping hand to neighbors. The Lees were the kind of family that everyone looked up to, a family that seemed to have it all: love, support, and stability, which was no surprise when vigil was attended by a large amount of mourners. From all accounts, the Lees family was incredibly knit. David and Brandy were described as devoted parents who placed their children's well-being at the center of their lives. They spent quality time together, often attending movies, family dinners, and game nights. David, a former athlete, had always encouraged Trevor to pursue his dreams, sharing his passion for sports while being there to cheer him on at every game. Trevor, the youngest of the Lee children, had a bright future ahead of him. Just entering high school, he was full of energy and had an undeniable charisma that made him well-liked by his peers. He excelled in both academics and athletics, showing early signs of leadership and potential. His passion for football was evident, and he dreamed of one day playing at the collegiate level. But Trevor wasn't a child without struggles growing up. He seemed to have given his mother, Brandy, hell. In one post, Brandy shared how Trevor was always causing her trouble. Little did she know, the child who had once driven her to tears would one day take not just her life, but his father's as well. To those who knew them, the Lee family represented the ideal American family. They were the kind of people who hosted barbecues on summer evenings, attended church together on Sundays, and prioritized family values above all else. Their home was a place of laughter, warmth, and love. They embodied stability and normalcy, and there was no hint of the tragedy that would soon befall them. The community admired how deeply the Lees cared for one another, and their home was always open to friends, family, and anyone who needed a place to feel safe and welcomed. David and Brandy were loving, hands-on parents, and their bond with their children, especially Trevor, was obvious to all who spent time with them. It was hard to imagine that anything could disrupt their idyllic life, But despite the outward appearance of happiness, there were dark and unsettling forces at play, hidden beneath the surface. As is often the case, the worst can happen when it is least expected. No one saw it coming, and no one could have prepared for the tragedy that would change their lives forever. On the evening of August 4th, 2025, what began as a typical argument in the Lee household would quickly spiral out of control. The exact trigger for the confrontation remains uncertain, as family disputes often arise from a combination of small, escalating tensions. However, what is clear is that the argument, which likely began over a minor issue, escalated rapidly and grew more intense, with emotions running high on both sides. Trevor, a 14-year-old boy who had always been known for his calm demeanor and strong connection to his parents, felt overwhelmed by the growing discord. As the argument intensified, something within him snapped. The pressure and frustration from the mounting conflict seemingly became too much to bear. In a tragic and horrifying moment, Trevor made the devastating decision to take his parents' lives. Using a firearm that belonged to his parents, Trevor carried out the unthinkable. It was a decision that not only shattered the peace of his home, but also left the entire community in utter disbelief. The weapon, legally owned by his father David, was normally kept securely in the home. Trevor killed his mother and his father in cold blood. After the horrific act, Trevor, still reeling from what he had done, left the home and walked to a nearby church, Cross Point Church, located about a mile away. It's unclear what Trevor's thoughts were during that walk, but his actions suggest a level of confusion and distress that is difficult to comprehend. He had just committed an incomprehensible crime, and yet in a moment of clarity, he made the choice to reach out for help. Once at the church, Trevor did something surprising. He called 911. His voice, though shaken, was eerily calm as he confessed to the dispatcher. The 911 call, later released to the public, became one of the most heart-wrenching pieces of evidence in the case. In it, Trevor, who appeared emotionally distraught but not hysterical, calmly explained what had happened. His words were chilling in their simplicity.
I'm by the road. I threw my backpack away from me. I'm stripped. I'm waiting for the police.
What do you mean you're
I have
stripped?
nothing in my pocket. I emptied my pockets and everything. There's nothing in my pockets.
Trevor then went on to explain, "I've killed my parents," and shared the location of the crime, waiting for the authorities to arrive. His request for prayer in the midst of his confession struck a deep chord with those who listened to the call.
Do you pray?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, I'll listen to you.
Well, I was going to ask if you could pray for me, ma'am. Right now.
I'll definitely be praying for you, son.
It was a haunting reminder that even in the darkest of moments, Trevor still seems to be grasping for some semblance of solace, even if it was through prayer. The dispatcher, clearly shocked but maintaining professionalism, continued to engage with Trevor, trying to keep him calm until the authorities could reach him. Trevor, still at the church, seemed almost numb, but his confession was an admission of guilt and a cry for help that no one could have foreseen. It was a moment of raw emotion and haunting regret as Trevor grappled with the magnitude of what he had done.
If the church,
I'm gonna pray first. I need to pray.
you need to pray.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, before you start praying, tell me exactly where you're at.
If you're driving towards the church, like I'm right out in front of the church. There's a big cross.
When the authorities responded, they were first alerted to Trevor's location at the church. Deputies quickly arrived, and Trevor was taken into custody without resistance. At the same time, other deputies went to the Lee household. When they arrived, they were met with a devastating scene. They found David and Brandy Lee dead, both victims of gunshot wounds in their bedroom.
That breaking news is out of Clay County, where a husband and wife were found shot to death overnight. The Clay County Sheriff says the couple's 14-year-old son called 911 early this morning, saying he had killed both of them.
According to the Clay County Sheriff's Office, this appeared to be an isolated domestic-related incident.
Our 911 communications center received a call from a young man who stated he had just killed his parents. He stated that deputies could find his parents at the house and that he had walked just over a mile away to a church. Preliminary investigation, and we're still very early in this investigation, it appears that there was some sort of domestic argument last night between Trevor Lee and his parents, and that this shooting culminated from that argument.
Investigators believe the shooting stemmed from the argument between Trevor and his parents, but many details of what led to the violence are still being uncovered. The sheriff confirmed that Trevor had been cooperative with the investigation, walking through the events leading up to the crime. However, authorities have not yet revealed much about the specifics of the argument or what exactly was going through Trevor's mind when he made the tragic decision. In the immediate aftermath, deputies launched an investigation to determine what had caused this drastic turn of events. They began looking into Trevor's history, including his mental health, school behavior, and any prior warning signs that might explain his actions. But the police weren't the only people Trevor had called that night. Trevor had placed a call to his sister who was out of state, but she didn't understand what was going on or what had happened, so she made a 911 call.
Sheriff's Office, Dakota Lane. How can I help you?
Hello, please. I need you some help. Honestly, I'm in the military. I don't know what goes on, but they just had a good day. They went to the movies, bro. They went to the movies.
Investigators would later try to piece together how the argument between Trevor and his parents had escalated to violence, and they began looking into Trevor's mental health history, school records, and any past interactions that could give context to his state of mind. But most of all, a disturbing question lingered in the community. How could a 14-year-old, a teenager still in the early stages of adolescence, make the decision to take such a drastic and fatal step? Investigators believe that the argument Trevor had with his parents earlier that night was the trigger. However, they also acknowledge that something deeper may have been at play, like unresolved emotional issues or a history of mental health struggles, which they would need to further explore. Trevor was taken into custody peacefully when he was found waiting at the church. Despite the gravity of his actions, there was no resistance when deputies arrived. He complied fully, even as he was apprehended. His arrest, although shocking, was without incident, as Trevor seemed to be in a state of shock and remorse, as evidenced by his 911 call.
Instant remorse. When you hear the sound of his voice and you hear kind of what he's going through, aside from the redacted part, you hear some instant remorse. And I think that's kind of bolstered by the fact that he left the scene and goes immediately to call 911 and turn himself in.
Throughout the investigation, Trevor has been cooperative with law enforcement, sharing his side of the story and explaining what he claims led to the horrific act. However, much of the specifics surrounding the argument and the events leading up to the shooting remain private at this stage. Investigators are working to establish a clear understanding of the family dynamics and whether there had been any signs or prior incidents that might have foreshadowed this tragic outcome. One key aspect of the investigation was the discovery of the weapon. Authorities confirmed that the gun used in the crime belonged to Trevor's parents, which raises questions about how Trevor had access to it. This detail is critical in the investigation, as the gun is central to understanding the events that transpired. Deputies have not yet disclosed all the information gathered from the crime scene, including any forensic evidence that might provide further insight into the timeline and what led to the tragic outcome. As the investigation into the tragic events of that night continues, law enforcement officials are still working to understand the full scope of the situation. Sheriff's deputies and detectives have been piecing together various aspects of the case to determine not only what exactly transpired, but why a 14-year-old like Trevor would resort to such violence. While Trevor has been cooperative, the circumstances leading to the deadly confrontation with his parents remain unclear. Investigators are paying close attention to Trevor's mental health, school history, and any potential behavioral issues. Given that the argument with his parents reportedly occurred earlier in the evening, detectives are trying to establish how the situation escalated. Was it a buildup of stress, emotional struggles, or a lack of coping mechanisms that led Trevor to feel as though he had no other option? Authorities have also noted that Trevor's actions in the aftermath were telling, Not only did he call his sister to inform her of what had happened, but he also walked nearly 1.5 miles to a nearby church where he calmly awaited police arrival. These actions raise further questions. Was Trevor in a state of remorse and seeking redemption by calling 911, or was he simply following a sense of responsibility after what he had done? His request for prayer on the 911 call indicated a deep emotional conflict, and investigators are now working to determine whether his mental state played a significant role in his decision-making. A crucial element still being explored is the accessibility of the weapon. It's confirmed that the gun used was a legally owned firearm that belonged to Trevor's parents, which brings up important questions about gun safety and whether there were prior signs of trouble that could have alerted anyone to the possibility of violence. The impact of this tragedy has extended far beyond Trevor and his family. The entire Middleburg community is still grappling with the horror of the events that took place within their quiet neighborhood. While law enforcement and the media focus on the investigation, community members have been left to reconcile their memories of a seemingly normal family life with the unimaginable reality of what transpired that fateful night.
For it to get to that point to where you feel like that was the only option he had is the saddest thing that you could possibly think of, for sure. Especially I related to my own daughter, and my daughter's 13, so to see that is terrifying, mortifying, all the adjectives you could use.
Trevor's sister, who was stationed out of state, was devastated. In a media interview, she expressed her confusion and sadness over what had happened. She described Trevor as a bright young man with a future ahead of him and emphasized that despite his actions, he was not a monster. Her words were a plea for compassion.
Did he make a mistake? Yes. He made a big mistake, a huge one. My little brother, he is not a monster.
She acknowledged that her brother had made a terrible mistake, but urged the public not to judge him solely based on this one tragic incident. She also expressed her love for her brother, even after the unimaginable crime he had committed. Her defense of Trevor, while understandable given the circumstances, highlights the complexity of this case. How does a family cope with the loss of two loved ones while simultaneously grappling with the actions of another family member who is the perpetrator? Trevor's best friend, Kyrie Bean, expressed his disbelief and sorrow in interviews with the press. He described Trevor as a good friend who was always full of energy and loved by those around him.
He was funny, charismatic. He always brought good energy, good vibes. He's not a bad person just because he made one bad decision. He's done so much for everyone I know, and I don't want him just to be known as a killer or a murderer, and that he was a great kid, a great son. They were probably the best or one of the best families I knew. They were funny, and they treated me very well. They told me all the time that they loved me like a son, and they treated me as such.
The news of the murders left Kyrie in shock, struggling to process the boy he had grown up with, turning into the person accused of such an unthinkable act. In a follow-up interview, Trevor's cousin, James Lewis, spoke about the close-knit family dynamic. He emphasized how this tragedy was completely out of character for Trevor, who had been known as a fun-loving and caring young man. James, who had witnessed the warmth of the Lee family firsthand, reflected on how their laughter and unity made this event even more incomprehensible. James expressed the pain of losing both his relatives and the boy he thought he knew.
I don't know what caused them to do it, so I guess I never know what caused them to do that, because, like I say, he had good parents, so for him to, do that, we don't know why.
As the sheriff's office works through the details, authorities are also looking into Trevor's previous behavioral history, his relationship with his parents, and any signs that might have suggested this violent outcome. The investigation is far from over, and every piece of the puzzle is vital to understanding what went wrong. Legally, Trevor Lee has been charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. However, since he is a minor, there are complexities to how the legal proceedings will unfold. As of now, Trevor is in custody and cooperating with investigators. There is still much to uncover regarding his mental state and the events leading up to the killings. Given that Trevor is only 14 years old, questions have been raised about how the legal system will handle his case. Will he be tried as an adult, or will he face juvenile court? The community is divided on this issue, with some feeling that a 14-year-old should not face the full weight of adult legal consequences, while others argue that his actions were too severe to be treated with leniency. The charges of second-degree murder suggest that the killings were not premeditated, but still resulted in the tragic loss of 2 lives. Whether this classification will stand as more information emerges remains to be seen. Mental health experts will likely be involved to assess Trevor's mental state and the factors that led to this horrible decision. As the investigation continues, questions remain. Why did Trevor feel that violence was the only option in the heat of the moment? Was there a pattern of behavior or previous incidents that could have foreshadowed this outcome? Could the situation have been prevented with earlier intervention? These questions weigh heavily on those trying to understand what went wrong. For families and communities, this tragic event serves as a stark reminder of the importance of open communication, emotional support, and mental health awareness, particularly in adolescence. As the case unfolds, law enforcement and the community remain committed to finding answers. Authorities urge anyone with additional information to come forward and assist with the ongoing investigation. For those dealing with troubled relationships or struggling with mental health, this case serves as a powerful reminder of the need to seek help and support before things escalate to a breaking point. The tragedy of David and Brandy Lee's deaths, coupled with the tragic fate of their son, serves as a somber warning about the complexities of family dynamics and the potential for harm when conflicts go unresolved. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.
For it to get to that point where you feel like that was the only option he had is the saddest thing that you could possibly think of, for sure. Especially I related to my own daughter. My daughter's 13, so to see that is terrifying, mortifying, all the adjectives you could use.